The cargo freighter drifted through the darkness of space like a tired old worker returning home. Its hull was scarred from years of salvage operations, patched in a dozen places with metal that didn't quite match. Inside, Hana wiped sweat from her forehead and adjusted her welding torch. She had been fixing the same cooling system for 3 hours now, and her back ached from crouching in the narrow maintenance tunnel. She was 28 years old, with short black hair tied back in a practical ponytail, and hands that were always stained with engine grease. Hana had left Earth 5 years ago, tired of the crowded colonies and limited opportunities. Out here in the outer rim, nobody cared where you came from. They only cared if you could do the work. The ship's captain called her to the bridge. They had found something interesting on their scanners. An old station, abandoned for who knows how long, floating in the dead space between star systems. Salvage crews lived for moments like this. Ancient stations sometimes held valuable technology or rare materials that could be sold for enough credits to live comfortably for months. Hana suited up with the rest of the crew and took the shuttle across to the station. The structure was massive, far larger than anything humans could build even now. Its architecture was strange, with flowing curves and crystalline structures that seemed to grow rather than being constructed. This was precursor work, technology from the civilization that had ruled the galaxy millions of years ago, long before any current species had even developed language. The team split up to cover more ground. Hana headed toward what her scanner identified as a central chamber. Her magnetic boots clicked against the metal floor as she walked through corridors that had seen no light in ages. The walls were covered in symbols she didn't recognize, flowing script that seemed almost alive in the beam of her flashlight. The central chamber took her breath away. It was enormous, with a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadow. In the center stood what could only be described as a throne, carved from a single piece of black stone that seemed to absorb light. Behind it, embedded in the wall, was a crystalline device the size of her fist, glowing with a faint blue light. Hana approached carefully. Her scanner was going crazy, detecting energy signatures it couldn't classify. She should have called the captain. She should have waited for the team. But something about the crystal called to her, a feeling she couldn't explain. She reached out and touched it. The crystal exploded with light. Not heat, not force, just pure brilliant light that flooded the chamber. Hana tried to pull back but couldn't move. The crystal was scanning her, she realized. Lines of light ran across her body, through her suit, examining every cell. Holographic symbols erupted into the air around her, spinning and rearranging themselves in patterns that made her dizzy. Then words appeared, floating in the air in front of her face. Words in universal standard, the common language of the galaxy. DNA scan complete. Origin, Earth. Authority level, absolute. Hana stared at the words. That made no sense. Earth was a backwater planet. Humans had only achieved faster than light travel 30 years ago. They were newcomers to a galaxy that had been exploring space for thousands of years. What could authority level absolute possibly mean? The crystal pulsed once more and something appeared on her left wrist, a mark glowing beneath her skin like a tattoo made of light. It was a symbol, elegant and complex, unlike anything she had ever seen. She tried to rub it off, but it didn't fade. It wasn't on her skin. It was in her skin. Her communicator crackled to life. The captain was shouting, demanding to know what was happening. The entire station had lit up like a beacon, visible for light years in every direction. Every sensor in the sector would have detected it. They needed to leave immediately. Hana ran back to the shuttle, her mind racing. The rest of the crew stared at her as she climbed aboard, their eyes fixed on the glowing mark on her wrist. During the flight back to the freighter, the ship's historian examined old databases and went pale. He recognized the symbol. It was called the Royal Crest, a legendary mark from the Precursor Empire. According to ancient records, only members of the founder bloodline could activate it, but that was impossible. Humans had nothing to do with the Precursors. Everyone knew that. The Precursors had died out millions of years before humans even existed. Within an hour, their ship's sensors detected incoming vessels, fast military ships, unmarked freighters, even what looked like a Galactic Council cruiser. Word had spread impossibly fast. Every major faction in the galaxy seemed to know what had happened. The captain called a crew meeting. The discussion was short and brutal. The crew voted to turn Hana over to the Galactic Council. They would get a finder's fee, protection from the other factions hunting her, and most importantly, they would survive. Hana was worth more than their lives, and they all knew it. Hana didn't argue. She understood their logic. But she also understood that once the council had her, she would disappear into some research facility, studied like a laboratory specimen for the rest of her life. They would cut her apart trying to understand why a human could activate precursor technology. That night, while the crew slept and the ship was on autopilot, Hana made her choice. She took one of the small shuttles, the kind used for short-range salvage operations. She took the crystal too, carefully prying it from its mounting in the cargo bay where they had stored it. The moment her fingers touched it, the crystal bonded to her hand, flowing like liquid before solidifying into a small disc that fit in her palm. The shuttle's engines were loud in the silence of space. By the time the crew woke and realized she was gone, Hana was already several light minutes away, racing toward the nearest inhabited system. Behind her, ships were converging from all directions. Ahead of her, the galaxy waited, suddenly full of dangers she had never imagined. The mark on her wrist pulsed with steady light, and Hana couldn't shake the feeling that her life as a simple salvage engineer was over. Something ancient had recognized her. Something that predated every civilization in known space had looked at her human DNA and declared her worthy of absolute authority. She just wished she understood what that meant, and more importantly, she wished she knew why every powerful faction in the galaxy suddenly wanted her dead or captured. The crystal felt warm in her hand, almost alive. Whatever secrets it held, Hana knew she needed to understand them quickly. Her survival depended on it. Perhaps humanity's survival depended on it too. Hana's shuttle limped into Kiro 7 with failing engines and empty fuel cells. The trading hub was exactly the kind of place she needed. A chaotic mess of different species and cultures where questions weren't asked if you had credits. The station orbited a brown dwarf star, barely visible against the black of space, and its corridors were always dim and crowded. She sold the shuttle for scrap, getting barely enough credits for a meal and a night in a cheap capsule hotel. The mark on her wrist was still glowing, though she had wrapped it in bandages to hide the light. Every news screen she passed showed her face. The bounty had reached ridiculous numbers. Governments, corporations, and private collectors all wanted her. Some wanted her alive. Others just wanted the crystal and didn't specify her condition. Hana needed help, and she knew only one person in this sector who might take the risk. Dane operated a small smuggling business out of Bay 17, running cargo that was legal but taxed too heavily for honest profit. He was human, which was rare out here, and he had helped Hana get off Earth years ago when she needed to disappear from some bad debts. She found him inspecting a shipment of medical supplies, his gray hair tied back and his weathered face frowning at a datapad. When he saw her, his hand immediately went to the plasma pistol at his hip. Then he recognized her and his frown deepened. "You're the most wanted person in the galaxy," Dane said quietly. "Give me one reason not to turn you in." Hana showed him the mark. In the dim light of the cargo bay, it glowed like a small star against her skin. Dane stared at it for a long moment, then gestured for her to follow him deeper into the ship. Once they were in his private quarters with the door sealed, he poured 2 glasses of something strong and sat down heavily. "My family died in the border wars," Dane said. "Killed by alien raiders while the Galactic Council did nothing. They don't care about humans. We're too new, too weak to matter. But if what they're saying about you is true, if you really have precursor authority, then maybe that changes things." Over the next hour, Hana explained everything. The station, the crystal, the impossible message about Earth and authority. Dane listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. "The galaxy is going to come for you," he finally said. "Not just bounty hunters. Real powers. The Virex Dominion wants precursor weapons. The Council wants control. And there are rumors that some religious order thinks you're their prophesied savior. You can't run forever." "I know," Hana said. "But I need to understand what this is before I let anyone take it from me." The crystal was sitting on the table between them, looking like nothing more than a smooth blue stone. Dine reached for it and it immediately pulsed with light. Words appeared in the air. "Secondary genetic marker detected. Authorization denied." "It knows I'm human too," Dane said, pulling his hand back. "But it only responds to you. Try asking it something. Hana felt foolish, but she held the crystal and thought the question clearly in her mind. What are you? The crystal grew warm, and suddenly the room filled with holographic displays. Star maps, technical diagrams, and streams of text in dozens of languages. Most of it was incomprehensible, but one display caught her attention. It showed a DNA sequence clearly labeled as human, with markers highlighted in gold. The same markers appeared in another sequence labeled Founder Genome. Before Hana could process what she was seeing, alarms blared throughout the station. Dane checked his security feeds and cursed. Enforcement teams were moving through Kiro 7, scanning everyone who passed through checkpoints. They were searching for her. We need to move, Dane said, already grabbing weapons and supplies. I have a ship 2 docks over. If we can reach it, I can get us out of the system. They made it halfway through the crowded corridors before the enforcers spotted them. These weren't local security. They were professional mercenaries, heavily armed and moving with military precision. Hana ran, Dane covering their retreat with shots from his pistol. But they were quickly surrounded in a cargo junction with no exits. The lead enforcer raised his weapon, and Hana felt the crystal grow hot in her hand. She didn't think, didn't plan. She just reacted, throwing up her arm in a defensive gesture. The mark on her wrist blazed with light. The air around them suddenly filled with objects. Drones, dozens of them materializing from nowhere with a sound like tearing fabric. They were sleek and deadly, floating in perfect formation. The enforcers opened fire, but the drones projected shields that absorbed the shots effortlessly. Then, moving faster than Hana could follow, the drones disabled each enforcer with precise energy bursts. Not killed, just unconscious. When it was over, the drones simply vanished, folding back into whatever dimension they had come from. Hana stared at her hand, trembling. She had done that. The crystal had responded to her need and summoned defenses that shouldn't exist. They ran the rest of the way to Dane's ship, a fast courier vessel built for speed over comfort. As they cleared the station and jumped to hyperspace, Hana finally let herself breathe. But the questions in her mind were overwhelming. The crystal projected another hologram once they were safely away. This time it was a figure, humanoid and tall, its features obscured by age and damage to the recording. The voice that accompanied it was deep and resonant. If you hear this message, the seeding protocol was successful. You are the inheritors, the children of the founder line. The authorization codes are written in your genetic structure, waiting to be activated. What we built, what we lost, can be reclaimed. You need only find the vault. The coordinates are encoded in the royal crest. Trust your blood. It remembers what we were. The message ended, leaving Hana and Dane in stunned silence. The crystal projected a new star map, with a route highlighted through space that no chart showed. A path to somewhere far beyond known territories. The vault, Dane said softly. Whatever that is, it's what everyone is after. And you're the only one who can find it. Hana looked at the glowing mark on her wrist. The implications were staggering. Humans weren't primitives who stumbled onto FTL travel by accident. They were descendants of the precursors, the civilization that had built the foundation of galactic culture. Earth wasn't a backwater world. It was a seed colony, hidden and forgotten. But if that was true, why had humans been left alone for so long? What had happened to the precursor empire? And why was it so important that someone with human DNA reclaim what was lost? We're being followed, Dane announced, checking his sensors. Multiple ships, different factions. They must have been waiting outside the station. Can we outrun them? Hana asked. Maybe. But they'll follow us wherever we go. If we're heading into uncharted space, they'll be right behind us. Hana looked at the crystal, at the route it was showing to the vault. Whatever answers existed, they were at the end of that path. She had spent 5 years running from her past, working dead-end jobs in forgotten corners of space. Now the entire galaxy was chasing her, and the only way forward was toward something even more dangerous. Set course for the vault, she said. If they want to follow us into the unknown, let them. Maybe they'll find out why humans were meant to have absolute authority. The ship jumped to hyperspace, and behind them, a dozen vessels followed into the darkness between stars. The journey through uncharted space took 6 days, following coordinates that existed nowhere in any galactic database. Dane's ship was fast, but the pursuing vessels were relentless. They maintained a constant distance, neither attacking nor falling behind. They were waiting, Hana realized, waiting to see where she would lead them. On the 3rd day, they picked up a distress signal. It was human, broadcasting in old Earth languages that most colonists had forgotten. Dane wanted to ignore it, but Hannah couldn't. Too many humans had died in space because no one came when they called for help. They found a damaged transport ship drifting near a dead moon. The crew was alive, barely, and their story was grim. They had tried to run to a frontier colony after news broke about Hannah and the Royal Crest, but their ship had been attacked by aliens who blamed all humans for threatening the Galactic Order. The transport was destroyed, their cargo stolen, and they were left to die in space. Among the survivors was Mirai, a former military pilot with sharp eyes and scars on her hands from old battles. She recognized Hannah immediately but said nothing until they were alone in the ship's medical bay. "I flew combat missions during the border wars," Mirai said. "Watched friends die because we didn't have technology as good as the aliens we fought. If what they're saying about you is true, if humans really have the right to precursor authority, then maybe all those deaths meant something." The other survivor who joined them was young, barely 20, with nervous energy and skills that impressed even Diane. His name was Taman, and he had been working as a systems hacker on frontier stations. He could break through security protocols that should have been unbreakable, and he looked at the crystal with fascination rather than fear. "I can feel it," Taman said when Hannah let him examine the mark on her wrist. "Something in my blood responds to it. Like a memory I can't quite reach. My grandmother used to say our family came from old Earth stock, from before the colony ships. Maybe she was right." With a larger crew, the ship felt less empty, less like running and more like pursuing something. The crystal continued to guide them, adjusting their course through regions of space where stars grew thin and the darkness between them stretched forever. On the 6th day, they arrived. The vault existed inside a dying red giant star, hidden within the layers of plasma and radiation that should have destroyed any ship that approached. But the crystal pulsed, and suddenly the ship's shield strengthened beyond anything technology should allow. They descended through the star's outer layers, through heat that turned the view screens white, until they emerged in a pocket of stable space. The vault hung before them like a metal moon, massive beyond comprehension. Its surface was covered in the same flowing symbols Hannah had seen on the ancient station, but these glowed with active power. Docking ports opened as they approached, responding to the Royal Crest without any communication needed. Inside, the station was pristine. Lights activated as they walked through corridors wide enough to drive vehicles through. The air was fresh, gravity was perfect, and everything functioned as if the facility had been maintained daily, rather than abandoned for millions of years. "Automated systems," Taman said, running his hands over a control panel that responded to his touch. "The entire station is self-maintaining. And look at this power efficiency. We couldn't build something like this even with our best technology." The central archive was a chamber filled with holographic displays, each one containing more information than entire planetary libraries. Hannah touched a panel, and the crystal synchronized with the archive systems. Suddenly she had access to everything: the history of the Precursor Empire, technical specifications for technology that made current galactic civilization look primitive, and most importantly, the truth about humanity. The precursors had been human, not identical to modern humans, but close enough that DNA tests would show them as the same species. They had ruled the galaxy for tens of thousands of years, uplifting dozens of younger species, building the hyperspace lanes that connected civilizations, establishing peace through overwhelming technological superiority and wise governance. But peace had bred complacency. A faction within the Empire, calling themselves the Revisers, argued that the precursors had become stagnant, that absolute power had made them weak, unwilling to adapt or change. The Revisers had developed a bioweapon, a targeted virus that attacked the specific genetic markers that made someone a precursor. The plague had spread faster than anyone anticipated. Within a generation, the Empire collapsed. Survivors fled to isolated worlds, wiping their own databases to prevent the Revisers from tracking them. Earth had been one of those refuge worlds, chosen specifically because it was far from major hyperspace routes and had natural resources to support a civilization that would have to rebuild from almost nothing. The precursors had hidden themselves so completely that their own descendants forgot who they were. Humanity had evolved on Earth for millions of years, never knowing they carried the genetic legacy of the galaxy's former rulers. "This can't be real," Mireille whispered, watching the historical records play out. We're not special. We're just people trying to survive. That's exactly what makes it real, Dane said. The precursors didn't leave because they thought they were special. They left because they were dying, and they wanted their children to have a chance at a different life. Taman had been exploring deeper into the archives, and his face went pale. You need to see this, he said. The revisers didn't disappear. They evolved, changed their name, integrated with the species they had uplifted. They're still here. They're the Council of Nine, the secret power behind the Galactic Council. Hana felt cold. The Council of Nine was a conspiracy theory, whispered about in dark corners of the galaxy but never proven. The idea that a small group controlled galactic policy from behind the scenes seemed too paranoid to be true. But the archives showed evidence that was undeniable. The same genetic markers, the same organizational structures, even some of the same family lines that had existed millions of years ago. The revisers had won. They had destroyed the precursor empire and then taken control of the new order that emerged from its ruins. And they had been watching Earth for centuries, waiting to see if humanity would ever rediscover its true heritage. The reason the galaxy had turned hostile so quickly when Hana activated the royal crest suddenly made sense. The Council of Nine had spent millions of years making sure no one ever challenged their authority. The return of a human with precursor authority was their worst nightmare. We need weapons, Mireille said, her military training taking over. If they know we're here, they'll send everything they have to destroy this place. The vault had weapons. The archive showed the locations of armories, defense systems, and most incredibly, a dormant fleet. Thousands of ships perfectly preserved, all keyed to precursor DNA. Hana walked to the fleet command center, and the crystal guided her through activation procedures. One by one, ships began to wake up. Fighters, cruisers, massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything the current galaxy could build. Each one responded to Hana's authorization, their ancient systems coming online and recognizing her genetic signature. We could take back the galaxy, Diane said, staring at the fleet displays. With this kind of power, no one could stand against us. Humanity would finally get the respect we deserve. But Hana was looking at other records. The archives showed what happened when the precursors had relied too much on their technological superiority. They had grown isolated from the species they ruled, making decisions that benefited themselves rather than the civilizations they were supposed to protect. The revisers had been wrong to destroy them, but they hadn't been entirely wrong about the problems. If we activate this entire fleet, we become what the galaxy fears, Hana said. We prove that humans with power are just as dangerous as the precursors were. So what do we do? Mireille asked. Let them destroy us? Let the Council of Nine continue ruling from the shadows. Taman was still working at a console, and suddenly he shouted in excitement. There's something else here. A protocol called Genesis. It was the precursor's final failsafe, designed to prevent exactly this kind of situation. The Genesis protocol was brilliant and terrifying. It could rewrite the fundamental laws of physics in a localized area of space, making advanced technology impossible to operate. No FTL drives, no energy weapons, no shields. It would force any conflict to be resolved through negotiation rather than warfare. But activating it required someone with precursor authority to merge with the Vault's central systems, essentially becoming part of the station forever. They would be alive, conscious, but unable to leave, a sacrifice that would protect the galaxy but cost everything. Before Hana could speak, alarms blared. The ships that had been following them had arrived, and they weren't alone. The Council of Nine had sent a fleet large enough to destroy a solar system. They were demanding Hana's surrender and the destruction of the Vault. The battle was coming, and Hana had to choose. Use the precursor fleet and risk becoming the tyrants humanity was accused of being, or activate Genesis and sacrifice everything to force peace on a galaxy that might not deserve it. The enemy fleet filled the view screens like a swarm of angry insects. Hundreds of ships from dozens of different species, all united by fear and the promises of the Council of Nine. They maintained position just outside the star's corona, their weapons charged and ready. Hana stood in the command center of the Vault, her hand resting on the crystalline control interface. With a thought, she could activate the entire precursor fleet, thousands of ships that would tear through the enemy forces like they were made of paper. The technology gap was that enormous. They're hailing us, Mireille reported from the communication station. The Council of Nine wants to speak directly to you. The holographic display activated, showing 9 figures seated in a semicircle. Their faces were hidden behind ceremonial masks, but their voices were clear. The lead figure spoke in a tone that suggested absolute confidence in their authority. You have activated technology you do not understand and cannot control. The precursors fell because they believed their power made them wise. You are making the same mistake. Surrender the vault, submit to our authority, and humanity will be allowed to continue existing as a minor species. Refuse and we will demonstrate why the old empire needed to fall. Hana felt rage building in her chest. These were the descendants of the revisers, the ones who had committed genocide against her ancestors, and then ruled the galaxy through manipulation and fear. They spoke of wisdom while threatening extinction. You're afraid, Hana said.
Not of what I might do, but of what humanity represents.
Proof that your entire civilization is built on lies and murder. The masked figure leaned forward. We brought order to chaos. The precursors ruled through force. We rule through balance. One human with ancient authority threatens to upset millions of years of carefully maintained peace. You call it peace, Hana replied. But humans die in your peace. Weaker species are exploited in your peace. You're not maintaining balance. You're maintaining your power. The council member gestured dismissively. You have 1 hour to decide. Surrender or be destroyed. There is no third option. The connection cut off, leaving the command center in tense silence. Dane was checking weapon systems, his expression grim. Mirai was calculating firing solutions, preparing for battle. Taman was still working on the Genesis protocol, trying to understand its full implications. We can win this fight, Diane said. The precursor ships are better in every way. We could break their fleet and send a message to the entire galaxy. And then what? Hana asked. We become the new rulers? Force peace through superior weapons? That's exactly what led to the precursors' downfall. So we just let them kill us? Mirai snapped. Let them destroy everything we've found here? Hana looked at the Genesis protocol specifications again. The sacrifice it required haunted her, but the potential outcome was staggering. A zone of space where technology couldn't be used for warfare, where conflicts had to be resolved through dialogue rather than destruction. I'm going to activate a portion of the fleet, Hana decided, just enough to defend the vault and protect human territories. Then I'm broadcasting everything we found here to every system in the galaxy. Every species will know the truth about the precursors, the revisers, and the Council of Nine. She sent the command, and 300 ships launched from the vault's hidden docks. Not the full fleet, but enough to make their point. The precursor vessels moved with impossible grace, their weapon systems charging with energy signatures that made the enemy fleet's sensors scream warnings. At the same time, Hana opened every communication channel she could access. The archives began broadcasting, sending the complete history of the precursor empire, the reviser genocide, and the Council of Nine's true nature to every inhabited world. Within minutes, billions of people across thousands of planets were watching the truth unfold. The enemy fleet hesitated. Their commanders were receiving new orders, confused communications from governments who were suddenly questioning everything they had been told. But the Council of Nine was not ready to surrender their authority. They ordered the attack. The battle was brief and brutal. Precursor ships danced through enemy formations, their shields absorbing fire that should have vaporized them. Their weapons were surgical, disabling ships without destroying them, cutting through military vessels while carefully avoiding any civilian craft in the area. It was a demonstration of overwhelming superiority paired with remarkable restraint. But numbers still mattered. For every enemy ship disabled, 2 more moved into position. The Council had brought enough firepower to destroy planets, and they were willing to use it. A massive dreadnought, larger than any ship Hana had ever seen, moved through the fleet toward the vault. Its main weapon was charging. A cannon that could crack a world's crust. That's a planet killer, Mirai said, her voice tight with fear. 1 shot and this entire station is dust. Hana could activate more ships. She could bring out the full fleet and turn this into a massacre. But that would make her exactly what the galaxy feared. A human with unlimited power, willing to kill to enforce her will. Taman, she said. How long to activate Genesis? 10 minutes to initialize, then someone has to merge with the core systems. It's a one-way process. Whoever does it won't ever leave the vault. I'll do it, Dane said immediately. I'm old. I've lived my life. You're young, Hana. You can do more good out there than I can. No, Hana said. This is my responsibility. I activated the royal crest. I found the vault. This has to be my choice. But before she could move toward the Genesis chamber, Taman stepped away from his console. He was smiling. A sad, gentle expression that made him look much older than his 20 years. I've been analyzing the genetic markers, he said quietly. My family line carries precursor DNA too. Distant, but enough for me to interface with the Genesis protocol. And I decoded something else in the archives. The revisers targeted specific markers, but they missed some bloodlines. My ancestors survived because they were isolated, hidden. I was meant to be here. Taman, no. Hana started to say, but the young man was already walking toward the central chamber. The crystal recognized him, responding to the genetic signature in his blood. Someone has to make sure humanity doesn't repeat the precursor's mistakes, Taman said. And someone has to make sure the Council of Nine can't just hunt down everyone with precursor heritage. This way, the galaxy has to learn to live without superweapons, all of us, including humans. He placed his hands on the Genesis interface and the system accepted him. His body began to merge with the crystalline structure, not painfully but gradually, like he was becoming part of something larger than himself. Hana, he said, his voice already sounding distant. Finish what we started. Show them that humans can be better than our ancestors were. Show them authority means responsibility, not power. The Genesis protocol activated. Space itself seemed to shudder as fundamental laws of physics rewrote themselves within a sphere millions of kilometers wide. Every ship in the battle zone suddenly lost power. FTL drives failed, energy weapons went dark, shields collapsed. The massive Dreadnought's planet-killer weapon shut down, its charge dissipating harmlessly. Both fleets were now adrift, helpless. The precursor ships were just as affected as the enemy vessels. Technology still worked for basic life support and maneuvering thrusters, but nothing that could be used for warfare. The battle had ended not with victory or defeat, but with enforced peace. Hana stood before the Genesis chamber, watching as Taman's form became indistinct, merging completely with the vault's systems. His consciousness was still there. She could feel it, but he was no longer entirely human. He had become the guardian of the protocol, the living safeguard that would maintain the zone of peace as long as he existed. The Council of Nine was hailing again, but their tone had changed. The masks were gone, revealing aged faces of various species. They looked less like rulers and more like desperate leaders watching their power crumble. You've made it impossible for us to govern, one of them said. How do you expect to maintain order without the ability to enforce it? The same way any legitimate government does, Hana replied. Through consent and cooperation. The galaxy doesn't need rulers who control through fear and superior weapons. It needs leaders who serve the people they govern. She looked at the disabled fleets, at the thousands of ships from dozens of species, all forced to coexist in a space where violence was impossible. This is humanity's answer, Hana continued. We're not going to conquer you. We're not going to rule you. We're going to give you a choice. Learn to work together, or stay paralyzed in this zone forever. The precursors failed because they thought power made them wise. We're going to succeed by remembering that wisdom comes from listening, not commanding. The ceasefire lasted 3 weeks before representatives from every major species agreed to meet at a neutral station. Not because they wanted peace, but because they had no choice. The Genesis zone around Earth and human territories made warfare impossible. And the truth about the precursors in the Council of Nine had shattered the old political order. Hana stood before the Galactic Assembly, no longer a fugitive, but not quite a leader either. She was a symbol, whether she wanted to be or not. The woman who had activated the royal crest and changed everything. The human who had access to technology that could conquer the galaxy, but chose restraint instead. The assembly chamber was enormous, with seats for thousands of delegates from hundreds of worlds. Most of them looked at her with suspicion, some with hope, a few with barely concealed hatred. Humans were no longer the irrelevant newcomers who could be ignored or exploited. They were the descendants of the precursors, carriers of genetic authority that predated every current civilization. You have violated the sovereignty of every species in this galaxy, declared a representative from the Virex Dominion. You activated ancient weapons, disrupted trade routes, and imposed your human limitations on space that does not belong to you. The Genesis zone only prevents warfare, Hana replied calmly. Trade, travel, and normal technology all function perfectly. You can't use weapons of mass destruction anymore. That's not a limitation. That's liberation from fear. Another delegate stood, this one from a species that had been uplifted by the precursors millions of years ago. You claim humans are the inheritors of the old empire, but you're primitives who only achieved faster-than-light travel in recent decades. How can you possibly deserve the authority the precursors held? We don't deserve it, Hana said simply. None of us do. That's the point. The precursors thought their power made them worthy to rule, and it destroyed them. The revisers thought they knew better, and they built a system that oppressed billions. Humanity isn't here to rule. We're here to share what we found and help build something better. She activated the holographic display, showing technical specifications from the vault's archives, medical technology that could cure diseases that had plagued species for thousands of years, agricultural systems that could turn desert worlds into paradises, energy generation that was clean, unlimited, and accessible to any civilization willing to implement it. This is what the precursors created, Hana continued. Not just weapons, but tools to improve life across the galaxy. The archives contain solutions to problems every species faces. We're offering to share all of it freely, with one condition. The assembly hall erupted in noise. Delegates were shouting questions, arguing among themselves. The concept of freely sharing precursor technology was revolutionary. Technology meant power, and power meant control. Giving it away without demanding submission seemed incomprehensible. What condition? Asked a delegate from a peaceful trade federation, one of the few species that seemed genuinely interested rather than suspicious. The galaxy agrees to a new charter, Hana said. One that prevents any single species or faction from holding absolute authority. No more secret councils controlling policy from the shadows. No more military dominance determining which civilizations matter. Every species gets representation. Every voice gets heard. And most importantly, precursor technology cannot be weaponized. It's for life, not death. The debates lasted for months. Some species walked out immediately, refusing to accept limitations on their sovereignty. Others saw the wisdom in the proposal, but worried about enforcement. How could anyone trust that humanity wouldn't eventually use their genetic authority to dominate once everyone was dependent on precursor technology? Hana's answer was radical. She released the genetic codes publicly. Every species could now understand the markers that activated precursor technology. With enough time and research, other civilizations could potentially modify their own genetics to interface with the ancient systems. Humanity's monopoly on authority would eventually end. You're giving away your only advantage, Mireille said, watching the genetic data spread across the galactic network. She had remained with Hana through everything, serving as both advisor and friend. It was never an advantage, Hana replied. It was a responsibility we didn't ask for. If other species can learn to use precursor technology responsibly, then maybe we can build something that lasts. Dane was less philosophical. He had taken control of coordinating human responses across all Earth's colonies, organizing what had been scattered and isolated populations into something resembling a unified front. We're still vulnerable, he reminded her. The Genesis Zone protects human space, but there are colonies outside it. Species that lost power and influence because of what you did. They're going to want revenge. He was right to worry. In the year following the assembly, there were incidents. Human ships attacked in neutral space, colonies subjected to embargoes and sanctions. The old prejudices hadn't disappeared just because the political structure changed. If anything, resentment had grown stronger among those who felt humanity had stolen authority they didn't earn. But there were also unexpected allies. Species that had been oppressed under the Council of Nine's rule saw humanity's actions as liberation rather than threat. Young civilizations that had been denied access to advanced technology now had pathways to development that didn't require centuries of exploitation. The galaxy was reorganizing itself, and the process was messy and painful, but ultimately moving toward something more equitable. Hana returned to the vault often. Taman was still there, his consciousness merged with the Genesis protocol. He could communicate through the facility's systems, his thoughts appearing as text or voice across displays. He claimed not to regret his choice, though Hana wondered if he was being entirely honest. Existing as part of a machine, even one as sophisticated as the vault, seemed like a lonely existence. I can feel everything within the Genesis Zone, Taman told her during one visit. Every ship, every station, every piece of technology. I'm not alone. I'm connected to more life than I ever was as just human. And I'm making sure the protocol works as intended. No weapons, no warfare, but life continues. It's what we needed. 50 years passed. Hana was 78 years old. Her black hair now completely gray. Her hands marked with age spots and scars from a lifetime of working with machinery and politics. She had refused every offer of leadership, every attempt to make her the representative of humanity or the guardian of precursor heritage. Instead, she had remained at the vault, maintaining the archives and helping researchers from across the galaxy understand the technology. The galaxy had changed enormously. The Genesis Zone had expanded, not through force but through choice. More species had petitioned to be included, valuing peace over military capability. Others maintained their own territories armed and suspicious, but no longer dominating through fear. The balance was imperfect but functional. Humanity had become neither rulers nor servants. They were partners in a galactic civilization that was slowly learning to cooperate rather than compete. Human colonies thrived, not because they had superior technology, but because they had become skilled at negotiation and bridge building. The experiences of being the newcomers, the ones who were dismissed and exploited, had taught humans empathy that more powerful species lacked. One afternoon, as Hana worked in the archives, a young girl arrived with a school group. She was perhaps 12 years old, human with bright, curious eyes. She approached Hana, who was just another old researcher to her, and asked a question that had clearly been bothering her. My teacher says humans used to be nothing, and then we became important because of ancient genetics. But that doesn't make sense. We didn't do anything to earn it. We just got lucky. Hana smiled, recognizing the same doubts she had carried for decades. She pushed up her sleeve, showing the royal crest that still glowed faintly on her wrist after all these years. You're absolutely right, Hana said. We didn't earn this. Our ancestors were refugees who ran away from a war and forgot who they were. We stumbled onto technology we didn't understand. And if I had used that technology to make humanity powerful, to force other species to respect us, we would have failed just like the precursors did. Then what made us important? The girl asked. We chose to be responsible instead of powerful. We chose to share instead of hoard. We chose to listen instead of command. The royal crest didn't make me special. The choice to use it wisely did. And that's a choice anyone can make, human or alien, with ancient authority or without it. The girl thought about this for a moment, then nodded seriously and returned to her group. Hana watched her go, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. That evening, she stood at the observation deck, looking out at the red giant star that surrounded the vault. Ships from a dozen species were docked at the facility, researchers and students all working together to understand the archives. In the distance, the Genesis Zone created a slight shimmer in space, a visible reminder of the sacrifice Taman had made. Did we do the right thing? Hana asked quietly, knowing Taman was listening through the facility's systems. His response came through the speakers, warm and certain. We gave the galaxy a second chance. The precursors failed because they thought they were meant to rule. You succeeded because you remembered you were meant to serve. That's what the royal crest really means. Not authority over others, but responsibility to them. Hana touched the glowing mark on her wrist, feeling the pulse of ancient technology that connected her to a civilization dead for millions of years. The precursors were gone, but their legacy lived on. Not in weapons or dominance, but in the choice one of their descendants made to build instead of destroy. Humanity had been given absolute authority over the galaxy's most powerful technology. And humanity's greatest achievement was choosing not to use it. That restraint, that wisdom born from being small and vulnerable, was what made them worthy of the inheritance. The galaxy was far from perfect. There would be more conflicts, more challenges, more species that resented humanity's role in galactic affairs. But for the first time in millions of years, the foundation was built on cooperation rather than domination. And that was worth more than any amount of ancient authority.